Hey, everybody, welcome to tonight's late night happy hour. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Excited to be joined tonight. Andy, baseball snuck up on us while we weren't looking.
Yeah.
It does that sometimes.
Yeah,
particularly during pandemics.
We were like, plotting out guests, stuff like that. I was like, you know, baseball, like spring training's going, like it's actually going now. Like this thing started back up again. It's just it kind of, like Brian said, snuck up. So we wanted to bring on Jorge Castillo, covers the Dodgers for the LA Times, and it's our first time actually meeting you. So thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, good to meet you guys. It's like the COVID way of meeting people nowadays, right? Just over some kind of Zoom or FaceTime or whatever.
And so Jorge's joining us from Arizona, where he's covering spring training. And but the good news is we have a lot of things. Like once we realized it was baseball season, we went ahead and made a list of stuff we wanted to talk about, and so it's extensive. But like I'm the first thing
really quick before we even get to the questions, I've got one off the top of my head just because you're joining us from Arizona. Like, is that your hotel room or is that
a background?
Is that a background?
No, it's my hotel room.
It's a sweet,
nice.
The greater Phoenix area.
That is a nice room, man.
It's like brand new. I mean, this hotel wasn't here last year when we were here for spring training, so it's like brand new. So
that's one of the great.
I was 100% sure that was a background.
No, this is not my virtual Zoom background. This is a reality.
A microwave back there. Look, nice
it's
wood wall.
Yeah, we got a dishwasher. We got a little mini stove with the two.
Wait, your room has a dishwasher?
Yeah, it's like one of those suite type of deals. It's like one of those extended stay hotels.
Well, yeah, but that's important. Spring training. Yeah. I mean, you're settling in for a little while. So, like, how long are you going to be there?
I think a grand total of about 4 weeks.
Oh,
okay. Well, I mean, in that sense, yes, you probably could use a dishwasher. You could use a few appliances if you're going to be there.
Yeah, man. They got knives and spoons and stuff. We're going to use all that kind of stuff.
Andy was getting ready to send something to Dear editor, Jorge is really abusing the. Did you know he's got a dishwasher in his room?
I forgot this was a happy hour, so I had to go down to the lobby and get myself a little
excellent.
drink.
Good job. Yeah. Nicely done.
Appreciate that. But yeah, that was actually where I kind of wanted to start. Like, this is, you guys didn't, it was last year during spring training, right? That you guys got canceled. So like, what's it like to be kind of back in it?
It's like we're back in it, but not really. It's like kind of, it's strange. It's limiting, for obvious reasons, right? Last year the entire year was kind of weird. When the season started, everything was virtual. We were like a million feet away from the players, the coaches, the managers, everybody. For the playoffs at Globe Life Park, we were like the highest level up, and that's the only access we really had. So we're kind of used to it at this point, which is kind of sad. But yeah, man, like I always remember last year when Rudy Gobert got the virus, and I was sitting in the press box at a Dodgers spring training game. I was like, oh, well, I wonder what this means. And that next morning, it was done. But yeah, man. So basically, we have access to the press box at Camelback, like the stadium at Camelback Ranch, and then we're allowed to go along the perimeter of Field 1, down the first baseline, all the way down. We can see Field 1, a little bit of Field 2, this 10-pack of mounds they have in the back, and the 6-pack of mounds they have in the front. And most of the stuff we're doing is virtual Zoom.
So obviously then you can't get super close to the team. What are the rules even about just being near other media, or like the way you guys, because I know like at Laker games, for example, at least in theory, it's pretty strict, even like how much we're allowed to talk to each other.
Yeah, there aren't any rules when it comes to the media. We kind of just do whatever we want. Obviously we're being careful when it comes to, being around each other. We're masked up and all that, but in the press box,
I have a few suggestions, or in terms of if there are no rules at all.
There's no security, in the press box. He's telling us like where to sit and all that. It's kind of just a free for all. But hey, we're being responsible, so we're doing our part.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, just certain states like for example, Florida or Arizona, you guys got sent to in baseball can be a little loose as it is. So you guys may have to police yourselves. So it's nice to know that you're doing it in a responsible way.
Yeah, we're wearing our masks and all that. I mean, next week our games start on Sunday and fans will be in the stands. The Dodgers play the A's. and fans will be in the stands and they'll be walking around us, and it'll be sort of like normal. Not really, but sort of like normal.
It's really strange though, because I mean, Brian and I have covered spring training before. Whether for the LA Times when we cover the Dodgers, 2005 to I think 2008.
Back in our day,
but also like doing some stuff for ESPN, the magazine, and stuff like that. Spring training is the most like direct access fans will ever have to players. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's one of the things that's actually really cool about it is you really have the opportunity not just to see these guys up close, but to really meet them, to have that ability to speak with them. It's got to be kind of weird to just start out a season in this particular place with that being taken away just for the overall vibe of the thing.
Yeah, it feels dead. I mean, they have a couple speakers going with this, radio station, and I stopped listening to radio, and you forget how like the same songs are, you hear the same song maybe twice in an hour, 4 times in a couple hours, and that's just on a loop, and that's really all you hear. And these guys obviously they talk their talk, and there's some chatter going on, but it's pretty dead compared to most years. Compared to every other year. When you have tons of fans coming out, hey, screaming Bellinger's name for an autograph, asking for this, that, and the other thing. So the vibe is very, very different.
Yeah, and in terms of that, like one of the things I think is fascinating about this Dodgers team, and some of the numbers, we'll get into this a little bit. Like I saw, today the projections, ESPN, I think it's Bradford Doolittle runs running the projections where like the win total's 107, just these absurd numbers that are coming up. And as good as they are, though, how much does the weirdness of last year, being the defending champion, but in a 60-game season with all the strangeness and how much does that, do you think, play into the way the Dodgers are approaching defending the title in terms of whether it's, proving it's legitimate or whatever it might be in what is at least in theory going to be a more normal 162-game season?
I don't think it's about proving that it was legitimate. I think it's more about they didn't get a chance to celebrate how they, would typically celebrate a World Series. And there was no parade, there was no champagne shower. That night got really weird with when Turner tested positive and then came back out. Once that happened, once he tested positive, like they had some kind of celebration schedule, like in a batting cage, like down underneath. I think it was a batting cage, but that was canceled. That was scrapped. I know some guys were drinking back in the hotel that they were staying at, but things were basically just kind of canceled. And everyone just the next morning just kind of wondered about Kershaw drove home, this guy went home, some guys went back to LA, then went home, and everyone kind of dispersed. And there wasn't like the whole, every year you go on, Fallon or whatever, Kershaw and Bellinger would go on Fallon together. They were doing it from their cars on FaceTime, they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And different guys have already said hey, I want to experience a real celebration. I want to win it in front of, fans at Dodger Stadium. I want to bring the trophy back, I want to do the parade and get drunk and do what Birdie was doing a few weeks ago and, just experience that.
Well, Brian and I actually, when this happened, when they won the World Series, we came up with, I think it was an awesome solution because you can't do the parade where you just gather tons and tons of people together, the teams on a float going by. Obviously you cannot do that in the age of, in the COVID age. What we thought they should do though is open up Dodger Stadium, the parking lot, and you basically do a drive-through parade of fans with the players sort of in the middle, and you're basically driving around them.
It's like one of those Christmas parades, basically.
Yeah, and you do it from your car, and at least you get to have some type of celebration that the players are out there in the middle. They would be essentially doing the exact same celebrations and beer drinking and all that stuff. They're just staying in one spot and you're circling them around. We thought that could have worked, but nobody listens to us.
I think something like that probably would have happened if Turner didn't test positive that night. I think once that happened, you had to worry about other guys testing positive and things spreading. So once that happened, I think that kind of ended the idea of maybe doing something like that.
And the kid from NYC says, "Is Jorge being held in a dungeon? Please blink twice quickly to let us know you're okay."
Well, shout out to New York chiming in on this LA discussion. But no, I tried to lighten the background and all that. This was better. So.
Yeah, I think it looks good. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
appreciate it.
I was I 100% thought it was a Zoom background. Like that's how nice it is. And well, I mean, like for people who don't know, you are from back east. Like you're not a native LA guy. You covered the Nationals for a long time as well. So how's the adjustment been for you? It takes what, 1 February before you become a big pansy?
Yeah, I got soft so quick. That's so true. I'm from Massachusetts, Worcester. I grew up in Mass. And yeah, I got soft quick, man. Like anything under 60 at this point, I get cold. And growing up back home, and my friends are texting me and saying it's like 32, and I'm like, it's like 68 here and sunny, and people here are in like parkas. It's like embarrassing, but hey, man, like it's the weather out here, you can't beat it. So.
Oh no, we grew up in St. Louis, and it's not as cold in the winter as Massachusetts, but it's legit cold. So we have experienced cold. I look back at that now and I'm like, man, we were living like savages. Like I don't know why anybody lives anywhere other than California, Arizona, like Florida.
You're telling me. My parents are from Puerto Rico, so they moved to Massachusetts a couple of years before I was born. So. Yeah, they moved from Puerto Rico, tropical. All the siblings are still there, and I'm like, why didn't you guys move back? Just move back.
I don't get it either.
It's funny. Did you grow up a Sox fan or
no?
Yankees fan? What was it?
I grew up a Yankee fan. Yeah, it was like I'm just a very much a stereotypical Puerto Rican. I was a Yankees fan. Grew up going to Yankee Stadium every year because I have an aunt who still lives in East Harlem, so we would just go and do that.
What is it about the Yankees with Puerto Rican culture that you would gravitate towards?
It's because Puerto Ricans, the first place they went to when the Great Migration, 40s, from the early 20th century through the 50s and 60s, was New York City. My parents were born in New York City, but my parents were born 4 months apart from each other in New York City. My dad was born in Brooklyn. My mom was born in Manhattan. And their families, not knowing each other, both moved back to Puerto Rico within a year. There was like a Great Migration and then a migration back. So New York City sort of were... Spanish Harlem is Puerto Rican, the Bronx, sections of Brooklyn. So it's very.
So they give you a lot of shit for that when you were a kid being a Yankee fan?
I wasn't sure if I could swear on here. Cool. All right.
Oh, you can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hell yeah, the shit was bad.
Thank you for
all right. Yeah. Like 04 when they won it, it was like from then on, it was just no mercy. I'll never forget Keith. I think Keith Folk closed that game. I don't know who was it closed that game against the Cardinals, whoever it was. Yeah, I'll always remember that. The Dodgers, the Red Sox one. That was
that was our,
good for them though.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like either team because Andy and I grew up in St. Louis, and so we grew up Cardinals fans.
Oh
and
yeah.
The Yankees actually sucked when we were younger. Like that was the sort of 80s pre Jeter. When they really weren't any good.
Years. The dark years.
So they weren't a threat, but that's.
I grew up. The first game I went to Yankee Stadium was '98. They won like 114 games that year. Yeah, Shane Spencer won like 4 for 4, and I grew up at the right time.
Bandwagon fan.
Exactly.
But yeah, so like, but when they look with the Dodgers, like they go back and if you have to pick something, like Betts is there, Bellinger's coming back healthy in theory, and they went and they did the Bauer thing and all that. Like, where is there anywhere on this roster that, like, if you you ask them to find something, Andrew Friedman, whatever, where they'd be like, yeah, we're a little worried about this, we're a little worried about that.
Worried might be strong, but the back end of the bullpen, I think, is the biggest question going into the season. Who's closing games, who's pitching the 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning. And to be honest, and they'll tell you this, it doesn't matter who closes games until October. This team's confident they'll get to October. And we saw last October, Kenley Jansen closed some. And then when they weren't very confident in him, they went to Julio Urias. They went to Blake Trinan, Brewster Gratterall. They have other guys that can kind of step in. But that is that's like nitpicking. This team's, as you said, some dudes out here projecting like computers got like 110 wins, 105 wins, whatever. It's nitpicking. And Kenley Jansen was still good last year. It's not like he was terrible. But it's all relative. When you're talking about the Dodgers this year, that's, I guess, the biggest quote unquote concern.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because Dave Roberts recently reiterated the idea that Kenley Jansen is their closer, but it's one thing to say that in February. It's another thing to maintain that over 162 games. And this stuff is always fluid, and in particular Jansen, he's in the last year of his contract, correct?
Yep.
So I mean there is only so much they need to worry about offending him if things aren't going well or alienating him in some type of way. It's just interesting because this question of him as the closer, despite the fact that he's one of the I would think at least one of the greatest closers in franchise history, a certain recent franchise history, just in longevity alone.
I have a soft spot for Takashi Saito, but that's just me.
We both love Saito. Was awesome.
He gave me a pair of those socks that a lot of the Japanese players like that have the toes, like the actual sewn out places for your toes to go into.
Yeah. That's like a thing now. Those are the thing now. I've seen them a lot lately.
But at the time they weren't, and he saw me looking at them one day, and then he gave me a pair the next time I was in the clubhouse, and I still have them. My Takashi Saito toe socks. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Well, he was also great too because his closing song was "Bad to the Bone," and it was so not his personality to be coming out to that.
That's probably why he did it, right?
So it was great. But like Jansen, he's that persona of him as that closer with the organization is really well established. But it's also funny because like the last 3 or 4 years, the confidence that if nothing else that you feel from fans towards Jansen has been all over the place.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Dave Roberts said what he said. Andy Friedman has said it too. You don't have to make a decision right now. You don't have to say he's not the closer, and you might not have to say that till October. The way they did it last year, and they never said it in October. They said they had that Kenley was the closer, and they would go by matchups and whoever was feeling right that night. And we saw Game 7 of the NLCS and Game 6 of the World Series. It was Julio Diaz who closed the game because he was locked in. It's one of those things that like the Dodgers aren't going to go out there and say something they don't need to say. They're very measured in how they approach all this stuff, and you don't have to make a decision now. Shoot, like Kenley can blow 10 games and they still might win 100 games. Like, it doesn't quite frankly matter too much. The way we're seeing it right now on paper, on computers, whatever,
What do you think is the gap then between them and San Diego, for example? Because obviously the Dodgers are the prohibitive favorite in the National League. It's just a question of who else is good enough to challenge them if something weird happens. And the first place people look is the Padres. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the Padres, how close do you think they are to the Dodgers?
I think they're pretty good. I mean, they're the second best record in the league last year. Granted, they had Clevenger and Lamet. Lamet's kind of a health question this year. Clevenger's not going to pitch. But they replaced, Clevenger with, they got Musgrove, they got Snell, and they got Darvish. 3 very good to great pitchers. We saw what Snell can do in the World Series before they decided to pull the plug. Guy won a Cy Young. Darvish, obviously his time in LA, my Dodger fans might not be too excited to talk about, look back on Darvish, but, he's been a very good pitcher, especially the last year and a half. Last season, he was great for the Cubs. They're good, man. Like they got Machado, they got Tatis, they got this Cronenworth kid who they traded for last year, who's really good. They got guys, and they're probably the biggest challenge to the Dodgers in the National League. But I think the Mets can be pretty good this year, much improved. Lindor, obviously, and Carrasco, and they got a couple other guys, Alonso, Conforto, DeGrom, who might be, you could say, is the best pitcher in baseball. And then I think the Braves, obviously, are another very good team. I think the Nationals will bounce back a little bit next year as well. So there are some challenges out there for the Dodgers in the National League. But I do think things have to get a little weird. I do think maybe injuries, whatever, and things can happen, man.
Like how weird?
8 months away.
Like on a 1 to 10, so like
talking like Hunter S. Thompson on acid, weird, like
an octopus or like a Godzilla type thing, or
I don't think the margin for error is huge, but there is some margin for error. Like getting Trevor Bauer expanded that margin for error right there. A guy who won a Cy Young last year and 18 was great too for the Indians. So Yeah, the Padres are good, man. Like if the Dodgers went around, the Padres would be like the prohibited like favorites to win the World Series, and everyone's still talking about them because of Tatis, the deal, personality, the swagger that team has. But I think the Dodgers are. Things have to get pretty weird. Basically.
All right, you just mentioned Trevor Bauer, and we were going to definitely talk about him at some point during the show. So now's as good a time as any. There's two questions with him in terms of what he means for this team moving forward, like what it means to have him on the team. One is obviously on the field. The other is culture. We'll get to that part in a second, but that question of how good Bauer actually is, I think is really interesting just because he's had 2 seasons that were fantastic. One of which, though, was a shortened, weird season.
He only pitched against the worst teams in baseball.
Right. And I mean, he pitched great, but it was a very specific set of circumstances. The rest of his career, he's been kind of ordinary. And they just brought him in for just a shit ton of money. Like, how good do you actually think he is? And how good does he have to be?
Well, I think he has to be pretty good. They're paying him a lot of money. He's the highest paid player in baseball this year. And if he opts in for next year, he's the highest paid player in baseball next year. I'll answer it like this. I think we can all agree here that the Dodgers they're a pretty intelligent front office. They know what they're doing. They make moves. I remember a couple years ago when they traded Puig, everyone was like, what the hell, you guys traded Puig? Man, they got Josiah Gray is about to come up. They turned Jeter Downs. He was part of the package for Mookie Betts. The unloaded money. They know what they're doing. So with that in mind, them giving Trevor Bauer that money, I think they think that this guy's for real and they can tap more into that because they're very much at the cutting edge of the analytics stuff, the data stuff, all this stuff that everyone keeps talking about and kind of rolls their eyes at. That's what they use and that's what they do probably better than anybody else. The Rays are up there, the Yankees are up there, but they're up there too. And Bauer devours that stuff. He loves that stuff. Yeah, that's my question. So this is like the perfect marriage. And I think, Andrew Friedman and his crew, they're like, we can tap into this stuff. And for 2 years, because this is going to be a 2-year deal, most likely, he probably won't opt in for that 3rd year. That's a risk that this team is willing to take. They have the money. I think Bauer's spin rate was really high last year. It kind of shot up last year. If he can keep that going, if he can, and then I just think he's a guy like if Andrew Friedman thinks he's going to be that, if he's going to give him that much money, if he's going to trust, he's going to take some fire because he's taking some heat for bringing him on, right? Because the whole culture stuff he touched on. I think it's because he thinks he can help this team win a World Series and be an ace. So that's how I would answer it. I think Andrew Friedman and his guys don't give this guy that much money if they think he's going to shit the bed.
How worried are they?
I certainly
about
like
that?
to think not.
Yeah. That's how I think of it. I think of it as these guys are very confident that they can tap into this guy's what he did last year. They saw what he did last year. They looked at all the numbers. They watched the video. Yeah, he played against the 2 worst divisions of baseball, but he also shoved against the Braves in the playoffs. And they look at that and think this is a guy and he's durable, and they like that.
How worried are they about the other stuff? The controversies around him. The guy. For lack of a better term, many people think is just kind of an asshole. I mean, depending on but I mean, in his clubhouses, I guess his teammates, I guess, like him. But how much concern is there because Dodgers culture is a big deal and team chemistry is a big deal, particularly in a COVID year where everybody really does have to be responsible for each other, and you're going to spend more time maybe around teammates than you otherwise would. Can't go anywhere or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think they think that their culture, guys, the veterans that they do have, the Kershaws, the Turners, the Betts, they can absorb a guy like Bauer. To be honest, I've never spoken to Trevor Bauer in my life personally, so it's hard for me to sit here and gauge a guy's character. We see what he's done online, and a lot of it is unacceptable in any workplace. I think anybody can tell you that. I think the Dodgers see that, and they hope that he can kind of learn the way he said he's learned and move past that. And I think when it comes to the clubhouse stuff, they think that they can absorb it and he won't be too much of a problem. They think their culture is that strong. Again, that's part of the calculus, right? As much as it is about his spin rate and his velocity and durability, it's about is he going to come in and fuck things up? We just won a World Series with a good group. They think it's a good group, right? They think it's a good clubhouse, good vibes. They don't want a guy to come in and screw it up. And I think that's part of the calculus. They do their homework, and again, it's a huge investment to kind of just pick somebody up who's going to come in and ruin everything. And when you're a favorite to win a World Series, even before they signed him.
Yeah, it's funny because he's obviously, as you said, the Dodgers, they are very meticulous when they make these type of decisions, and they do a ton of homework. And this is not the type of signing that they had to make because they're so deep anyway. So it would speak to the type of confidence that they would presumably have in bringing in Bauer. The flip side, though, it's just he's an unusual guy just in the sense that he doesn't feel like a typical Andrew Friedman type contract. Like in terms of,
I would disagree.
Mm-hmm.
He was free. This is great for Andrew Friedman. This is what they wanted to give Bryce
in that
Harper.
sense, yes.
This is what they, if Bryce Harper was coming to LA, it was going to be on this kind of deal, 3-4 year deal.
You know what? I take it back. You're correct.
Yeah. So correct. Short term, you take you pay a guy a shit ton of money, and it's a short term thing. And if it works out, he helps us win a World Series.
I keep forgetting that third year basically doesn't count.
Yeah, and then after that, money comes off the books, on to the next.
What's interesting though about him though too, I think is we're talking about the online persona of Trevor Bauer, and to be perfectly honest, I don't think it was a great sign that I think it was February 11th he does his press conference talking about that he's learned a lot and has tried to grow, trying to do the right things. February 12th he's complaining about an article that Molly Knight wrote for The Athletic and seemingly singling her out as the only person that was criticizing Trevor Bauer at all. And, full disclosure, Molly's a friend of ours and think very highly of her, but does seem a little interesting that he happened to zone in on seemingly the one woman after his history. And he's got like that very barstool type, online persona, very, anybody says anything about me, I'm going to hit him back 100 times hard, like that type of mentality. But the flip side is he's really into analytics. Like he's really into like the deep nerdy data. Like he's very granular that way. Like it seems like his approach to the game is very different than like his approach to Twitter.
He is, he's like I don't know all the pitchers in baseball, but he comes across as the one who's most into that stuff. He's very vocal about it. He's been about that stuff for a few years now. He was one of the first guys who was really into it. He's been into it for a long time. You can go back to, I guess, his college days. He was really into it. So, and I think he said it himself. He thinks that allows him to kind of tap into, he's not the most athletic guy, but that allows him to tap into, his body and kind of just get everything he can out of it. And again, I think that the Dodgers, who are really into that stuff, see that's like, again, a perfect marriage, the partnership that they want. Bauer's used the word partnership a million times when talking about the Dodgers. Them working together, they think they can, make.
And if he wants to, if he chooses that he wants to opt out after a year or 2 years and get that big, the next big deal, he can't be a dick. Like, that's part of it. Like, it works for everyone.
I will say this. There's you can't be a dick if you're really good.
That's true. If you want, 1.98 ERA, you can pretty much, I guess.
You can be, as long as, he hasn't committed a crime. He hasn't, being a dick is subjective, I guess, to a certain extent. And, if you're really good, there's always a level of how much you're willing to take on.
That's true. I can't be an asshole. Other people can't.
I can't either.
People who are better at what they do.
I got to be a super nice guy every day.
Yeah. Good question from Suzanne2525 on the chat. How does the Bauer money affect re-signing Seager? You could ask the same question about Kershaw. You could, they got a couple guys who are coming up next year.
Yeah, they got money coming off the books. I think just between, if you count Seager, Kershaw, Jansen, Joe Kelly was an option. The Dodgers probably won't pick up. I think it's like something like 75 million. So they have money coming off the books and they have money. So I don't think this directly affects whether they're going to re-sign Seager or not. They have the money to do so.
How much it's such a weird time economically for baseball. And this year, even if fans,
I will say this. we're sitting here talking about, re-signing Seager. We don't even know what CBA is going to look like next year. This luxury tax. This is going to be December 1st. This might be a shit show. Like we might not even. There's going to be some strife. There's going to be negotiate. Like we've seen them negotiate the union in the league last year. So we don't even know what's going to look like. Whether free agency is even going to happen. How we sort of always envision it. So.
Right, and that's kind of what I was getting. Like the finances of baseball are so strange right now. Seager is a Boris guy, correct? And like those, famous for going out and testing the market and squeezing every nickel out of it that you really can. Is it even possible to estimate how much somebody like Seager, let's say he replicates what he did, in the playoffs and what he did last year over the course of a season, what he even might get given the sort of dampened finances of baseball? Yeah, it's a hard game. It's a hard game to play anyway.
It's tough to say, like we saw what Tatis signed for, the 14-year deal, and Bauer signed what he signed for, but that was a short-term deal. I imagine I'm just going to speculate here that a Seager would want a long-term deal. All those guys, and the other part of this is he's not the only shortstop coming, who's going to be a free agent next year. It's going to be Lindor right now. It's Carlos Correa. It's Javi Baez, it's Trevor Story, it's Marcus Semien, it's Andrelton Simmons. It's going to be a lot of dudes out there.
Oh my God. It just dawned on me when we were talking about Tatis's deal, that 14-year, $300-something million. My daughter is in 4th grade. When that contract is over, she will be like a couple years out of college.
Yeah, it's a long.
Like, oh my God.
I mean, climate change. If you believe in climate change, San Diego might be underwater by you. So.
Well, maybe they're out. That's why they're not worried.
Is that good or bad for the Dodgers that there's 29, marquee shortstops that are going to be on the market next year?
I would say it's good.
Yeah.
A lot of supply. You got to wonder about the demand. And the Dodgers have the Dodgers have more money than most, and it's good in that, if Seager does decide to go elsewhere because he wants to, or because, he can't figure it, financially they can't figure it out, the Dodgers have fallback options, which is never a bad thing.
Yeah, it's just the money it's something like that. Cause like, we had a question from Squire Sultan, like what kind of money is Bellinger get when that day comes?
Yeah. It's so hard to predict 3 years from now. Like, again, I don't even, we don't know if there's going to be a salary cap, we don't know if there's going to be a salary floor. We don't know, how this luxury tax thing is going to change. Revenue sharing is going to change. Like, it's really hard to gauge. And I think, Tatis signing his deal right now is, perhaps with that in mind, what maybe the Padres or maybe his side, we really know what's going to happen, next year. So let's just do this now. I wonder if that's going to be the case with Lindor or Correa, who have talked about maybe signing extensions with their teams. It's murky, man. Like, there might not be baseball in time next year. Actually, I would bet some money that there will not be baseball on time next year. I will not be sitting here at spring training next February. I think it's gonna get ugly. We saw the Kevin Mather stuff the other day. That was ammo for the union, and it's gonna get really ugly.
Yeah, I mean,
you better use the hell out of that dishwasher.
There's a lot about that conversation we want to get into for sure. This is another good question though. The kid from NYC, you currently follow, I'm not even sure you knew this. You follow 999 people on Twitter.
That means I need to
be the 1,000.
That means I need to unfollow some people because I'm trying to stay under 4 digits. But I'll unfollow some people and then I'll follow the kid from NYC.
The kid from NYC.
The kid from NYC is up at 2:30 in the morning. What's he doing?
Or
it's 1:30 in the morning.
I don't know if he was fishing so much as he was just trying to figure out who would be the other one. But you want to dial that back is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, but I'll dial it back.
Okay.
If I could throw out suggestions, I would start with Dan Wojcicki. If you're looking for people to unfollow, I'd go with Dan.
Yeah, that's actually a good call. I saw you tweeted it.
Someone, Dan Wojcicki.
How you say that name?
I don't know. I'm not even going to try. Wolke, whatever. I thought this was the strangest thing I think that happened in the offseason when the White Sox hired Tony La Russa. I know that's not your beat. What was the deal with that?
Yeah, I don't know. I did see the other day that Tim Anderson, the shortstop, apparently had a meeting with him and came out of it pretty encouraged. And backing the Russo. It's funny because the White Sox are the team that shared a facility with the Dodgers, so I'm sure we'll see them quite a bit here in spring. I haven't counted how many games they're going to play against the White Sox, but yeah, I don't know. That was an interesting hire.
76 years old.
Yeah, that's cool.
So you mentioned the Kevin Mather thing, and there are a few things actually that I want to get into about that. But the interesting one was, one of the interesting was the things that you alerted to with service time. First of all, I mean, how common is it? How common is it that in terms of teams just holding guys back? The Rays, I think, are pretty well known for it. But how big of a deal is it that they kind of caught somebody saying the quiet part out loud?
And then, well, that's basically what it was. I mean, I'll put it this way: it's a big deal when a team doesn't do that. When they don't hold the guy back. It was a big deal when they did the Tatis started on opening day, made the opening day roster for the Padres. It's a big deal when Pete Alonso made the Mets opening day roster. Like, I remember that because it was a big deal. Like Chris Bryant was held back. I mean, guys have been held back. I mean, Chris Bryant filed the grievance, lost, but it's an open secret. And Mather just happened to be the guy to say it out loud. And it's one of those things where everything, not everything that guy said, because he might have a view on interpreter and language and stuff that maybe other guys don't. But when it comes to service, like that kind of stuff, the service time stuff, that is like how a lot of people in baseball front offices think. It just makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you think that way? You want a guy for next year, like you want it for 7 years instead of 6. I would want something if I want something, I want it for a longer time. It just makes sense. He just said it all out.
What is that? What damage does that do, though? I mean, because I mean, ultimately they're following the rule that's there. Like, what comes of saying something like that out loud?
At Mariners camp must be awkward right now. I don't know, man. It's players distrust. Obviously, he talked about Kyle Seager, Corey Seager's brother. Saying that he's overpaid, and he said he's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
But a future Mariners Hall of Famer.
Exactly, he did say that.
Glass half empty, glass half full. Depends on how you look at it.
But if I'm a player on that team, I'm like, this guy's talking shit about us, and he's like saying that it's not how the team thinks, but he's the president of the team. Come on, And also, if I'm a free agent or something, I'm like, why would I want to go play there?
Yeah.
If they don't clean house. So I don't know. It has a lot of, it has real effects.
For what it's worth, if any future employer ever refers to me as overpaid and I'm making that type of salary, I promise you will not hurt my feelings. Like, if we want to put this to a test, you can pay me whatever you want and then talk all you want publicly about how much you regret that contract. I don't give a shit. Like, really, like if there are any employers out there who want to be able to talk freely, hire me and put me to this test. I promise I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, that was just one of the things the guy said. I mean, the list is long.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're going to get into some of the specifics, but like, what really stood out to me with Mather, again, before we get into some of even the other stuff, is just the entitlement that is required to feel comfortable saying that on a Zoom call that can be recorded to a bunch of people who are outside the organization. Like the
Rotary Club. I didn't even know the Rotary clubs were still around.
The lack of common sense and the recklessness, like, forget his mentality as a fireable offense. The lack of judgment and the entitlement in and of itself is fireable. Like, you clearly are too dumb for this job if this is the stuff you're doing.
I've never met the guy, but I assume it was very much a, hey, trying to impress people type of thing, on a Zoom call. Like, he's never met these guys. Look at me, I got stories. But, that shit's going to get on YouTube in 2 seconds. Everything's recorded nowadays on these Zooms and stuff. You gotta have a little better feel than that.
I think it's exactly what there are certain people, and you've certainly met them in this industry, where it is very important for them to project like how much I know. Like, I am privy to information. I'm an important person, and the way they do that is by telling people and spilling secrets and saying things. But the entitlement is incredible. But the other stuff that got a lot of attention is language. And you are someone, for people who don't know, you go to the LA Times and you look at the the sports page, and you'll see articles from Jorge both in English and in Spanish, and obviously able to communicate with players in Spanish, which is something that Andy and I always regretted being unable to do. A couple questions here. First is just, what is lost? I feel like much more emphasis is put now on trying to communicate with players in their native language, if that's what they're most comfortable with. But what has been sort of lost through the years of just not being able to talk to giant chunks of a baseball clubhouse?
Probably a lot. I mean, guys in the 80s, 90s, if we think of like Latino stars, I mean, shoot, Vladimir Guerrero.
Yeah.
I mean, his son's in the big leagues now. I grew up like looking at that guy. Well, that's a stud, right? Like, he was an all-star Hall of Famer. I don't remember one interview he did. I don't know if he ever did an interview. I don't know what he has to say. Sosa, obviously, he spoke some English, and he got by with that stuff. But it's not just language either. Like, it's culture.
Yeah,
it's stuff. It's about, like, you can't just pick up Rosetta Stone and go talk to a Dominican dude. That's just not gonna happen. You're not gonna pick up on like how they talk, and just like pick up on like where they're coming from, and like why they say what they say, and why they think how they think. And I'm not from Dominican. I got Dominican family, and I grew up with a lot of Dominicans on the East Coast, Massachusetts. We have a lot of them. Like, Mexican culture is new to me. I'm out. Like, my fiance is Mexican. I do everything in LA. The Latino culture is completely different, 100%. But I do think, me talking to Julio Diaz, I'm able to communicate with him, and I'm able to pick up on things that maybe even if someone who knew Spanish, just quite frankly, like, wouldn't be able to necessarily. I just think it's cultural too. It's not just linguistic. It's not like linguistic. It's not. It goes beyond that. Yeah. And I had Puerto Rican players. I covered Carlos Beltran, who was at the Yankees in 2014, and I mean, we just hit it off just because my cousin was trying out for his fucking academy team when I was covering the team, and like things like that. Like, I know how a Puerto Rican sort of thinks and where they're coming from, and because I got family. And that stuff matters. And I wrote a Victor Gonzalez story last year about his upbringing, and the reason why I had that story was because I went into the Oklahoma City clubhouse in 2019 to write a Gavin Lux story. I was tipped off that Victor Gonzalez might be a guy to help that team that year, so I just went up to him, and he was this timid kid who knew no English and was sitting in the corner by himself, and we talked for a half hour. He told me everything that I asked. He told me how he's nervous. He can't believe he's here. His father was stabbed and killed. And he told me that, he left. He cried when he was coming off the mound in games. And then he just quit the team and went to Mexico, and, all that stuff. And that, to me, you just don't get that if you don't speak the language, if you don't make the guy feel comfortable. So it's a lot of it's language, and I think a lot of it's culture too, and I think people don't quite get that part either.
Do you sense? Sorry, Andy, but do you sense that the onus is sort of switching? Like, the criticism of Mather, when he talked about it was Julio Rodriguez, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and so he's not the one at fault. It's not the player who's at fault. It's the executive who's talking about him. I know when we were younger, and Andy and I are, I think, a little older than you, but like when we were younger, it was like, oh, these guys are just kind of dumb guys who don't have a lot to say. Like, do you feel at least there's sort of an evolution in how people view the Latino ball player who may not speak English when he gets to this country?
Yeah, I didn't cover ball back then, but I grew up. If you're Puerto Rican, you grow up, even if you never even saw him play. But Roberto Clemente is a god, right? Like, I have family who has his portrait on their walls, at home. And my dad would always say he remembers when he died. He was 7 years old. He remembers that day, all that stuff. And Roberto Clemente, they called him Bob. They chastised him because he didn't speak English quite right, but he stood up for himself. He was like, basically, fuck you, you know. And you read, you know, I read his biography, and you know, you read like how this guy was just he's just fighting like he's worried about playing, and then he comes off the field and he's like fighting another like fight in the clubhouse, like dealing with these sports writers who just kind of give him shit because he can't communicate right. And they would transcribe and put, you know, publish his quotes, how he would say it all, you know, with his accent and all that. And, you know, that's sort of looking back on that now, it's like crazy. But I know I wasn't around back then, so I can't, you know, it was the norm, I guess. Right. But yeah, it's we've come a long way. That guy saying what he said some good things about Julio Rodriguez too. He said that, you know, he's a great personality.
That's what's funny about it is, I mean, in a vacuum, like, and I mean, really just in a very specific vacuum, isolating that one section of it, I would be willing to give Kevin Mather the benefit of the doubt that what he was trying to say in an extraordinarily clumsy way was that despite having some degree of language barrier, and, you know, the way he had described that his English, I believe the exact quote, isn't tremendous, that Rodriguez has the type of personality that players gravitate towards anyway. And he's the type of guy that everybody in the clubhouse loves being around, even if there is that difficulty with language. The problem, though, comes with, you know, it's coupled with the stuff that he said about Iwakuma that cannot be defended on any level. I mean, like the idea that you're bitching about paying a translator
$70,000.
My first reaction was, a translator comes that cheap? Like, really? Right. Like, that's all it costs for something that important? But also, too,
I'm gonna get one myself.
Like, yeah, I mean,
start going places.
But like, also, too, apparently, Rodriguez's English actually isn't really like a detriment, or I mean, if you want to put it like that, or any type of hindrance. So what that means is either Mather is kind of flirting with a xenophobic type mindset with bringing this up, you know, seemingly unprompted twice, or as the now former president and CEO of the Mariners, he didn't know his prospect, who was, I believe, the 9th rated prospect in baseball. Like, neither of those explanations are good.
I'm with you that, like, if you listen to it, it's, you know, he didn't do a good job portraying, I guess, what he wanted to, what I assume he wanted to, because, you know, if you listen to stuff that's way, you know, I've listened to things that are like way worse than that. So when I listened to it, I was like, this isn't that bad. You know, I legit thought that Iwakuma stuff is different. You know, you're gonna bitch about $75,000. You know, I don't know, maybe some benefits, whatever. You know, like, I mean, that's part of it, man. Then don't have the guy come on board if you really don't want to do that, right? It's funny because I mentioned Beltran in 2014. I wrote a story. Michael Pineda was a pitcher for the Yankees, and I don't know if you guys remember. He got caught with some tar on the brim of his hat at Fenway Park, and he got tossed. You know, he got tossed for that. And then after the game, Fenway Park's clubhouse is like, shit is small in this room. And there's like 15 reporters.
Room,
yeah, that's right. This is luxury here. Yeah.
But it is a small clubhouse. That's true.
Smaller than this luxurious.
and no dishwasher.
Yeah, that's true. There was no dish. That Fenway clubhouse, it definitely did not have a dishwasher. But anyway, super small. 15 reporters gathered around this guy. He doesn't have an interpreter. You know, he said he's cool with. The Yankees asked him, I guess, if he was cool doing it in English. He stumbled through it, asking tough questions. He was sweating. I remember the next day I went to Beltran. I was like, did you, because I came away from that thinking, like, what the fuck? Like, why did he have an interpreter? They were grilling him. And I went up to Beltran the next day and I was like, do you hear, you know, and like, do you hear what he said? And he didn't have an interpreter. And he like went off. He's like, it's bullshit. We don't have interpreters. These guys are coming up. Yeah, you can go up in the system and take some English lessons, but you're not ready to speak to the media, you know, and represent your views and thoughts. You know, I'm afraid of going up to the fucking media and talking, you know, like these guys it's tough. So I wrote a story about that, and, you know, Beltran just went off. And I think it's the interpreter thing is like, these people just don't understand like how like hard it is to get up in front of people and talk. Like, it's not like small talking, you know, with your boy. It's like, you know, you got to articulate what you're trying to say in a way that's not lost in translation. You know, past tense. You're dealing with tenses and words you don't quite know off the top of your head. It's like, Iwakuma needed an interpreter. Good, get him one.
Right. You know, it's funny actually when we're talking about sort of what gets lost in these, language barriers and stuff like that, and the need for interpreters, the need to be able to directly communicate. When Brian and I covered the Dodgers between 2006 and 2008, is when Rafael Furcal was on the team as their shortstop. And Furcal's a great guy. I mean, just terrific personality, like a really just warm, genuine guy. And you would always notice in the clubhouse that he would be really holding court with all the Spanish-speaking players. Like they really all gravitated towards him. And you could see that he really one of the leaders for like that section of the clubhouse. And I say section because these things can be very sectioned off. And there's an element of leadership, for the team as a whole that can be lost when these players don't have the ability to completely communicate with each other. And it goes the reverse ways as well. Like, the English speaking players being able to totally communicate with Spanish speaking or Japanese or Korean. I think sometimes it gets scrutinized more, or, you assume players not speaking English have less of a leadership role.
Right. You wonder. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Or they're dumber.
For starters, I mean, that was, like I said, the sort of the assumption when, especially, when we were growing up. But like, does that cost them that? I mean, are Latino ball players just less able to be that clubhouse touchstone because
that onus should swing both ways?
It should, absolutely, but because of language.
Right, but it often doesn't. I think it's not seen as swinging both ways.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been in so many clubhouses, so it's hard to say. But a guy like, Ronald Acuna Jr., he seems to be a guy that the guys get behind. And I think, and that this is where we're talking about interpreter. We're talking about Acuna can talk to it. He's been he's been in the system in United States. He was 16, right? Or maybe not 16, maybe he's DR or whatever. But then he came over here. He's been here for several years. He can probably small talk with the guys, talk shit, gas them up, get them ready to go. But now it's different doing like something like this. It's just not the same. There are different levels. It's nuanced, right? It's all relative. Like the guy can talk to Freddie Freeman, in the dugout and, about baseball and hitting. And, hey, he threw me a curveball here. This is what's happening. But it's different getting grilled after a game or, whatever. And, I'm always like, when I see somebody like a Dominican kid or a Venezuelan kid come and speak like good English, like right away, like Juan Soto's English, it's super impressive. The kid learned English in like 3 years and was not afraid. He's a super confident kid. He just does interviews, and like it's amazing. And like it's hard to not give too much. You can't give too much credit to someone like that because it's really hard to do.
Yeah, and basically everything about Juan Soto is just absurdly impressive.
It's really impressive person.
You mentioned before, there were a couple other things we want to get to back with the Dodgers and sort of predictions and insight there. But one more thing on this that I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned it earlier. We had your colleague, Gustavo Arellano, on a couple times before during the election. We've had him do a couple things with us. And he's
recently verified Gustavo Arellano on Twitter.
Check mark. He told, when we were talking about the election, made a great point that is, I think, so often overlooked both in local politics, but certainly in national politics, that treats the Latino voting bloc as one person, like one type of person. And it assumes that it's the same in Florida as it is in Texas, as it is here, as it is in New York and all these other places. You kind of touched on that a little bit. Do we make that same assumption in baseball clubhouses that the Venezuelan guy is the same as the guy from the Dominican is the same as the guy from Puerto Rico?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, without generalizing, the Puerto Rican guys come over tend to know more English than the Dominicans and the Venezuelans. Some are fluent. Kike Hernandez is pretty fluent in Spanish. He's from Puerto Rico. He's born and raised there, went to high school there. He speaks really good English. The other ones, my cousin, for example, who's a Cubs minor leaguer, who grew up born and raised in Puerto Rico, is from a small little town in the middle of the island, went to public school, he didn't know a lick of English when he came over here and still is trying to learn, right? And then you got the Dominicans, some are more educated, like Jose Bautista, who probably learned some English back in the day. And then others who just didn't go to school for too long, never really got good at English, where the Venezuelans tend to be, again, I'm generalizing here, They go to high school more. They, probably take English classes, maybe know a little more English, so they're maybe a little more ahead. But yeah, it's like they're completely different. Man, it's like we're talking about England and Australia. Like maybe not England and Australia, but like it's like they're different countries. Like
and so like is the assumption also too that just because ball player A and ball player B both speak Spanish and come from a Spanish speaking country, that they would automatically have that kind of bond person, like, oh, you guys must be friends?
Well, I think it helps a lot. Yeah. I mean, so the cultures is like, they're not like completely like different, like Puerto Rican food and Dominican food is very similar. And the music, they like bachata and merengue a little more, but we still like that. And we like salsa, and they like reggaeton like we do. And they do dembow. And like, there's a lot there. Same with Venezuelans, Colombians, the Caribbean side. The Mexican side is a little different. I would argue, being out here, it's different. But there's still a lot of, in common there too. And language is very, very important. And like the culture is like, some similarities in the cultures. But yeah, man, it's different. Like, it's, I don't know, it's just also you might just not like a guy because you don't like a guy. Like you might not like an American guy just because he's an asshole. Just because he's American doesn't mean he's gonna be your boy. Like, it's, you just don't like people sometimes,
That's what bonds them all together. Doesn't matter where you come from, what language you speak, you're at least going to dislike one guy on the team, maybe more. Like, there's going to be plenty of guys that you don't like, and that bonds them all together. It's just always
Jeff Kent was particularly useful.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He bonded the entire clubhouse. They all couldn't stand him. Like I remember it was so funny. We covered the team the year that Manny arrived. And, the previous year before Manny was hands down the worst locker room we've ever been in any sport. Like, it was open warfare that year between the older players and the young, at the time, the kids. It was like Russell Martin, James Loney, Matt Kemp, that group. And Jeff Kent just kind of ran that clubhouse through the power of a dark cloud of just tension that he purposely maintained, basically so nobody would talk to him. He just made the entire clubhouse uncomfortable. Manny's first day, he walks in and he sets up this boombox, which, now isn't that uncommon in the clubhouse, but back then that never happened.
Not like in the Dodgers clubhouse.
No, back in the Dodger clubhouse, you would never hear music.
What do you have, like Napster or something? What was
I mean, he had some type of. This was 2008. I don't even know if that existed.
It was his Friendster account.
It was MySpace after.
Yeah, but he was blasting. Just, I don't know if it was salsa or merengue but just blasting it. And I happened to see off in his corner Jeff Kent at his locker, and you could just see the look on his face was like, well, my time's done. Well, this is over, because ain't nothing I can say to this guy because he's actually better than me. Like, nothing he's not only going to be more popular than me, he's better than me. He's got a ring. I don't like all that. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious.
He came in, did really well, right? So
he was great. It worked for a while until he wanted, but then he wanted to have a baby, and it was hard after that. But who can blame him for wanting to start a family? Gustavo points out on the chat, it's interesting how Caribbean Latino culture dominates MLB, while Mexican culture is a huge minority. Few parts of Latino culture are known to mainstream in the U.S. like that. I mean, it's like. It's just it's an aspect of this that I hadn't really thought about, and in kind of looking at your work and some of the things that came out this week, and then remembering that conversation with Gustavo that we had, it was something that I thought was worth talking about. Before we let you go, the 107 wins is what the projections are putting out. If you had to take an over-under on that, 107 is a lot.
Yeah.
Would you go over or under?
I'll go under.
By how much?
I don't know, 4 or 5.
Hater.
I mean, it's just one of those things. It's like how many, I think if this team has a big lead in division or big enough, like you rest guys down the stretch, you don't have to go on the gas pedal, push down the gas pedal too much.
how much of that is dependent on what how well San Diego plays?
Yeah, I think that does matter a lot. They have a lot. Everyone's hyping up San Diego. They had one good year, and it was a 60-game season, and they had guys get hurt. Tatis fell off last year towards the end. That's something that's not really talked about. So it's interesting to see if they can sort of keep up their end. Obviously, they got some reinforcements in the rotation and stuff, but yeah, it depends on how good they are, and you want to win the division. You don't want to play and dealing in kind of wild card situation.
No,
you want to win that division.
Last question I have for you before we let you go. As someone who's covered the Dodgers, you know that until they finally broke through in 2020 and won the World Series, this question of when they were finally going to do it had been hanging over them for a while, and they'd been to World Series and lost. They'd had some pretty high-profile flameouts leading up to that point. How much do you think just having one thing last season can liberate them as a team and as players, like in a way that might actually set them up for future success beyond just the inherent talent of the team?
I think it helps. Clayton Kershaw talked about it extensively when I went to go see him in January. The relief, the burden that was lifted. I think him more so than definitely more than anybody else. But even the guy like Justin Turner, Kenley Jansen, the guys have been around quite a bit, and it doesn't hurt. Like, they know what it takes to win, and it doesn't hurt to have a guy like Mookie Betts. That guy, for some reason, the Boston Red Sox decided it was best to trade him, and they traded him, and now Mookie Betts is the second best player in baseball, and
he is one of the most inherently likable athletes I've ever seen. Like, my wife is a big Dodger fan, but she doesn't follow baseball at all. She just follows the Dodgers, and that's it. So she didn't really know who Mookie Betts was until this trade happened. I'm not joking. Within like 30 seconds of seeing him not even play, but just like interviewed and his general aura, he was like her favorite player. And like, she didn't know who he was.
Yeah, he just like impacts the game in so many ways. I mean, you guys watched it, like base running, defense, at the plate, clubhouse wise, the guys love him. He's like a leader.
So that smile, man.
Yeah, and he's he was front and center in a lot of things they did last year. The social justice stuff, he was front and center, kneeling before that first game. He was kind of leading the boycott of that one game in San Francisco. He had an eventful year last year.
Oh God! And that team, they catch the ball so well. Just that side of the outfield between Bellinger and Betts takes away so many runs from the other team. We saw it obviously in the playoffs. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. It is not everybody is willing to just meet somebody and give them an hour. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. We appreciate it a lot.
We'd love to do it again as the season goes on. We love your work at the LA Times. Again, you're not Gustavo Arellano. You're not Dan Wojcicki either. You're Jorge Castillo.
We just threw one of Gustavo's comments up on the chat. It was poorly taken.
I like Will Ferrell. Just read whatever's in front of me.
Now you're good. All good.
Jorge Castillo covers the Dodgers for the LA Times.
I knew that was coming. I knew something like that was coming.
We appreciate it.
I just assume everybody I meet that has a Latino sounding last name is Gustavo Arellano. Were you not
listening to this whole part about the clubhouse and how everybody isn't the same just because they speak Spanish? Like, you were leading the you were asking the questions. I like Kevin Mather can put on a good face for things for a little while. You can fool some of the people for a while. He lasted for like 20 years in that job.
We are Brian's Rotary Club. He's
seriously, man. Like,
he's just out here saying stuff.
I don't even know what a Rotary Club is. Oh, now George is all like, "Come on, Brian, do better." Our friend from 710.
These last couple minutes have been kind of eye-opening and ugly.
We really should.
Can you edit a live stream? Is there a way to?
Oh yeah. No, I'm fine with keeping it live. I was okay.
No, you're good.
I always say end the show at 11. Don't go past.
Anyway, we really appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. It was great meeting you.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right. Tomorrow, Dave Schilling. We'll
Yes.
talk some basketball, some fashion, some wrestling. It's going to be a good time. Dave Schilling. And then on Monday, we'll come back with who, Andy?
On Monday, we've got Ali Khan.
Ali Khan. We're going to talk food from the Food
Yes.
Network.
Yeah.
Woo! All right. We'll see everybody tomorrow.